Authority Board of Directors. The first item on the agenda is the minutes from January 2nd, 2019.
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
I'll second that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Tom abstaining?
Abstain, yep.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the draft redevelopment plan, and I will turn it over to Jim Young for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As some of the board members may recall, back in the early days of the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, a redevelopment plan was submitted to the Commonwealth as required by legislation, as well as the memorandum of agreement with the Commonwealth, really focusing on projections for residential and commercial development here at Union Point, with a particular focus on a 5-year period of time from FY14 through FY19 in particular. Because at the time, we were concerned that there may not be not enough net new revenues from the development to offset some of the annual debt service on the Parkway bond. And so we really wanted to project forward to see when the project may turn positive at that time. At this point, we are nearing the end of the deferral period for the what's referred to as any deficiency payments that may be required for the Parkway Phase 1 bond. So we spent the last several months internally, also working very closely with the master developer. And I want to thank Tom Berkeley in particular for his assistance, working with the staff here at the SRA to come up with an update on the redevelopment plan for the Commonwealth, to kind of coincide with the end of this deferral period. We used the same template from the 2014 plan. We thought that would be most appropriate. At the time in 2014, we were projecting 2,855 residential units and approximately 900,000 square feet of commercial space, which was a mandated commercial district per the legislation at the time. And back in 2014, projections really were making the assumption that both residential and commercial development would be completed here by 2025. This particular update now projects an additional 1,000 units of residential development. So we're looking at 3,855 residential units, targeting a completion date of 2030. Plus approximately 4 million square feet of commercial development. And we have a target completion date of 2033. As you may know, the master developer has projected upwards of 8 million square feet of commercial development here for Union Point. We thought for this particular update it would make more sense to be a little bit more conservative, and even 4 million is maybe a little aggressive, but we thought that would be a good starting point for this particular update. So with this particular plan, we had really two mandates: to go back and look at what's really happened during the deferral period versus what was projected at the time, to see how successful we have been over that period. 2014 plan, we projected a little over 1,100 residential units through FY18. We've actually constructed 920 through FY18, so about 80% of what was projected at the time. We also projected that about 55,000 square feet of commercial space would be occupied through FY18. We have 43,000 square feet occupied so far through FY18. Again, pretty close to 80% of what was projected at the time. We've also looked at what milestones and project enhancements have occurred during the deferral period. Two things really stick out. The zoning amendments that were approved by all three host communities in 2016 increased the development footprint here at Union Point. It expanded the allowable end uses throughout the project and built in additional site design flexibility as well. So with that increase, we're allowed to, focus on the additional residential and commercial development projections that we're looking at now versus in 2014. The zoning amendments have really opened up the door for that expanded development footprint. East-West Parkway within Union Point was completed in 2016. That was, at the time, a critical transportation improvement project that needed to happen, and with the Commonwealth's assistance, the project was completed in one construction season. We've retained RKG, which is our financial consultant, to assist us in reconciling and reporting the net new state revenue during that deferral period. That particular report will be submitted to the Commonwealth, particularly Department of Revenue and Administration and Finance, along with our redevelopment plan update by the end of this month. So far, and it's sort of in draft form, we're in the neighborhood of $8 million in net new revenues for that particular deferral period. So not quite the entire debt service for that window of time, but fairly significant. Again, roughly around $8 million net new revenues for that particular period. We've also incorporated a look ahead for the current fiscal year all the way through the target date of fiscal 33. We're still tracking, generally what the infrastructure costs are going to be both on-site and off-site. Roughly $175 million for water, wastewater, transportation, site demolition, off-site transportation improvements, as well as on-site transportation improvements. And this number is generally consistent with the 2014 plan. Really, aside from the Patriot Parkway construction and some demolition and site prep work undertaken by L-Star, the numbers are relatively consistent, particularly with inflation and other considerations. So, at the projected build-out that we're incorporating into this update, we're averaging about 250 residential units per year all the way through FY30, and approximately 250,000 square feet of commercial development per year through FY33. That's the pace of development that is projected within the plan, and the net new revenues and projections that RKG is working on is based on that development schedule. If that schedule holds true, net new revenues are expected to exceed the annual debt service by FY22. Another item that we've been able to focus on is really ramping up our GIS capabilities here as an organization, and largely in part to cooperation from the master developer, which has not always been present. So working closely with Tom and others at L-Star, we've been able to build in some development projections, infrastructure, and really started to drill down and being able to create a tool that we'll be able to use internally, focusing on zoning, property transfer, information development activity, infrastructure, and really being able to use that, frequently, not every 4 or 5 years, when we do a redevelopment plan update, but very frequently as development plans change, we can build in a lot of financial information into that model, and we feel it'll be a very useful tool for all the project stakeholders to benefit from. I can give you a couple of examples of where we want to go with this in particular. back to you at some point when this is a little bit more refined and we're able to build in, particularly some of the infrastructure and development activity. But with the story map potential, you can build in, over time, how property is transferred out from the Navy to the authority, and then obviously to the master developer and end developers as well. So we're building sort of a chronological map essentially to get us there, and trying to load all the supporting data behind it, financial data. We know that certain parcels are tied to different financial arrangements, and we want to really be able to spend some time and continue to upgrade the GIS so it's very interactive depending on how we want to really use the system. So right now we've really been focusing on zoning, sort of master plan layers, property transfer. We'll be building in more infrastructure over the coming weeks as well. And again, with on the development side, let's see. The redevelopment plan update that's before you. There aren't a lot of graphics. There are really two main graphics. It's a residential phasing plan and a commercial phasing plan. Building that into the GIS. And as new information comes online, we'll be able to, continually update this. And really populate some of the proposed development parcels going forward. A lot of the information is really based on the close collaboration with L-Star to date over the past 6 months. And we realize that things will change, but we want to be set up so that we can adjust accordingly and really use this tool to the maximum benefit of the organization at this point. So it's just a sort of a brief, quick overview of the redevelopment plan, but we'll certainly welcome any questions you have tonight or over the next couple of weeks as we continue to finalize this for the Commonwealth's consideration.
Jim, you said there's 43,000 square feet of commercial currently, which is about 80% of where the plan should have been up until FY19. Are you, the bubble is counting as the majority of that, I take it?
That's
The sports
considered,
complex?
no, that's considered the long-term care facility.
The sports complex?
No, the long-term care facility at
Yeah.
Faring Way,
Yeah,
40,000 square feet,
okay.
and the bank.
In the bank, in the 3,000 square foot bank.
You got it.
Yeah, and how about what's the sports complex considered? Isn't that a commercial entity?
It's recreational.
It's really, even though it's a for-profit entity?
Considered to be recreational.
Wow.
I think this GIS tool is fantastic. I'm not big on allocating resources to just gee whiz nothingness, but there's a tremendous lack of transparency in this project, even from a board level, to know what's what. And I think this will be incredibly useful to the public, to the board, and to the potential developer, because trying to envision what this place is with FOST 1, FOST 2, and every other FOST is just nearly impossible. So
Yeah.
I think
Right.
this is a tremendous asset.
Yeah, and Jim's really been working on the plan for 6 months, working really closely with, Eric's been working on it, and RKG, the consultant, and Tom Berkeley. So there's a lot of information. So this is the best and most realistic projection that I think we've ever had. And to be able to put it in a GIS interface this way and to continue to collect parcel-specific information will allow us in the future to do things like take a proposed development and do an initial economic forecast, like a fiscal impact scenario from what we're putting in. So that it will be tremendously helpful to master developer, subsequent developers that wanna do parcel-specific projects, and the board. You'll be able to see on one map, just with a couple of clicks, what the history of this project is, and be able to forecast into the future some of these proposals, and at some point, we will be able to do, sort of a three-dimensional piece to this too, so we'll be able to do volumetric calculations of commercial and residential activity. So it's really cool. As Jim mentioned, this becomes a dynamic tool, so we're not reinventing the wheel this is something we would use on an almost daily basis. And so that's really what you want a dynamic information tool that not only staff and the board use, but that we can open up to the public. It'll answer a lot of questions in a very sort of self-directed and intuitive way. So pretty excited about it.
Thanks, great job.
The other good news, I think, is on those deficiency payments for the Parkway bond. I mean, they've been deferred for a while, and we're totaling up some real big numbers. And so it's taken a lot of effort from Jim and Eric and Tom to sort of comb through that with RKG, and with RKG's assistance in discussions with the state, what we can count for new state revenue, what we can't. We've adjusted that. So to come up with an $8 million number really limits our liability on that. So that's a known now. I think we've got maybe $1 million left, which makes the discussions about deferring that a little bit more easier with the state. And the projections that we could be over a revenue neutral situation by 2022 on that bond is really good news for the project.
And the state's on board with that $8 million number?
Yeah. RKG's their consultant too.
Okay.
So really solid communication there. And so we look forward to having the discussion with the state, but Mark Adia from A&F has been working with Jim and Eric on this over a couple of months, so we're pretty, we think we're gonna have a good meeting. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of disagreement on the numbers.
So no surprises if they're looking at it in draft?
No.
They want to work with us on this.
Great.
Anything else from the board? Thank you for that hard work on that, Jim.
Very good, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a treasurer's report. Do you have any?
Now, unfortunately, Eric was planning to be here, and he wanted to discuss sort of an anti-fraud policy and some potential model bylaws that the board should accept. All of those are recommendations from some of the audits, but yeah, a family emergency couldn't be here tonight, so we'll just push that off to the next meeting.
Okay. All is well with them, but thanks for the update. And then the next is executive director's report. Do we have anything?
Just to let the board know that yesterday the South Shore Chamber of Commerce had a small sort of invitational luncheon, and they had Peter Hebert, who's the new executive director of Mass Econ. So they're the group that tries to market Massachusetts outside of Massachusetts. And so he came by for a tour of the site. Met with him and Peter Foreman, and then we stopped off at Elstar and talked to Jerry and Tom, some of the people over there. So that was a good meeting, and I think there are a couple of things that Peter can do for us in the future to help us better market the site, especially commercially. That's really what they do. They work with site selectors from bigger companies and look for places to locate businesses. That's it.
I have no topics in addition to those that were on the agenda. Do we have any public comment on the issues covered at tonight's meeting? Yes.
Yes, you don't have any projections for anything being built in Rockland and Abington until after what, 2030?
No.
No.
So there's nothing going to be built from now until after that?
No, I actually think Rockland's probably gonna get pretty hot because they're an opportunity zone. But that wasn't part of the projection that we looked at. That was too much of an unknown at this point. But on top of, and we wanted to be conservative about the estimates too. There's a lot of unknowns. But I think the Rockland side of this project is gonna get a lot of attention over the next.
So this report is about the whole project, not
It's
town
a
specific?
comprehensive report They're very realistic numbers for things that are already zoned and don't need to be rezoned.
It's the current knowns, not the
Yeah.
unknowns.
So it doesn't foreclose in any way anything that might happen in Rockland.
Do you have any idea when something might happen in Rockland and Abington?
I don't think we have much of an idea of what's happening on this project right now at all. I mean, we don't know who the master developer is going to be or what form will be in a few months from now. I mean, candidly, I just think that SRA has no ability to make that projection. We will have to work with either L-Star if they find some way to survive the mess they're in, or the new master developer to come up with more concrete plans. We have no insight beyond what you have at this point.
The only thing I could say is there is interest from a number of different people that want to do things there.
Well, there's 115 parcels that are going up for auction on February 7th, so that brings somebody else in.
Yep.
That's all unknown. So we can't really comment on that.
Yes.
Steve Lamont, 16 Thistle Lane. So this is a great tool for playing the wild scenarios also. So I'm curious, are there any targets for rental properties such as apartments and, condos? Because that's certainly a fast way to grow out, and I just wondered, how are you gonna deal with that? I mean, I would think it's gonna come to a head. People that are involved with buying these parcels and stuff might suggest, and we've heard it before from Jerry. I'm not for that. I think, we're pretty, if you look at our property now, what's the ratio in residents, of, rental
Probably around
versus
1 to 1,
ownership?
right? 1 to 1-ish.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Not far from 1 to 1.
Laura?
So do we envision that maintaining 1 to 1? I don't know.
So again, I think it's hard to tell. I think the one thing we can say is that, say this property is bought at auction by some additional developer or groups of developers, they still have to conform to the zoning as it already exists, and they still have to go through the SRA's process for approval. And you sat in meetings, when was it, July, August, when we saw sort of that proposal for a whole lot of rentals, and that was something that we sort of, wholesale rejected. And I don't think that would change just because this goes to a foreclosure auction. I think we continue to believe that this area has quite a bit of potential, and the best use of the potential both for the residents here and for the surrounding communities is not to build it out with a bunch of apartment buildings that get a quick profit for a private developer while just taxing the community's resources and services even more. So as the plan builds out more, if there's quite a bit of commercial and retail, there will be more residential, and I'm sure that there may be some more rental residential if it's the right project at the right time. But I don't think that the SRA has any plan to allow any developer, whether it's L-Star or a buyer at an auction or an investor who's looking to bail L-Star out, to come in, build 3 or 4 apartment buildings as the first projects that happen. That's just frankly not part of our vision for it, and I don't think that any of the towns want that happening in their towns, because like I said, it increases the number of residents who are taxing the services and doesn't increase the commercial tax revenue.
Yeah, the rules of the game can stay the same, it's just the teams are changing.
That's right.
And I can tell you, Steve, that when we were putting together the redevelopment plan and working closely with Tom, he had his portfolio, particularly in the residential interest, was quite varied between rentals, ownership, age restricted, affordable workforce, single-family townhouse, multifamily. It was quite a varied portfolio, which was good to see. And also realizing that, several of these projects could be under construction at the same time and would be offering different product types at the same time as well. So that was encouraging to see what interest has been out there recently.
Anything else? Yes, Mr. Longman?
Well, I'm along with Wayne, Director of Town Planning. I don't think, Paul, you've probably done this yet, maybe the GIS helps you. have you projected under the current zoning what would be the maximum residential build-out? Have you done that?
No.
Jim? Not really? I'm just curious on that.
We've seen sort of a lot of iterations of it from the master developer over time of how they could use those caps on the units, and we've seen most of it's been a public meeting. We've seen a lot of different.
Yeah, the variance based on what's left to build out now is pretty substantial. So, but this tool should help us
Project, yeah,
be able to
maybe
do
be able
that.
to, yeah, I'm assuming that
Yeah.
one of the easier tasks that we'll be able to do for you.
Yeah, to move in that direction, and even to Steve's point, to be able to in one place start to see how many units there are in total, what's the design, the square footage of those
Yeah.
units, how many are ownership, how many are rental, will help the board balance. Their mission is to make sure that appropriate development happens in a way that benefits the component towns. So, I think this will become one of the main tools for measuring that.
So the other question I have relative to the draft report, which I thought was pretty good, gives people like a little primer of what's happened here. So actually, in a nutshell, for a small report, it's pretty good. So on the recreational areas, this is like on page 12 of the draft report. I'm a little bit focused on that now because Waymett's doing its open space plan. So it really, it doesn't give much specificity of what's happening. It just talks generally, about 1,000 acres will be open space, talks about trails, talks about the recreational soccer fields, but it talks in general about basketball courts, hockey rinks, active recreation areas. Doesn't give us anything like where is this going, how big it is, and I know where, we don't have that scale yet here. We have about 1,200, is it 1,200 units?
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know how this is going to work out, but the town working with, whoever the master developer is, Alstar or whoever, and of course the SRA, we want to put a little bit more meat on this so we can project out. It needs to be a tot line for whatever age group, or there needs to be whatever, and kind of like zero in a little bit on where we're going to put it. So right now, there's 1,000 acres. It's been that way for a number of years, and we talk about trails, and we talk about wiffle ball courts, and blah, 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 and all this stuff, but we don't even know how many, and we might not get to it in this round. Again, this plan's good for 7 years. This thing's gonna go out to FY33 or whatever.
So for us and our mission right now, it would be irresponsible for us to project with any more specificity, because I think you've touched on it by talking around it, but I think we can frankly, this is another failure of the master developer, and it's a failure that they can't remedy right now. There was quite a bit of open space. They made a commitment to working with Weymouth, Rockland, and Abington on these issues, and it just hasn't happened. So we're in a place where we have yet another failure. We can't project what's happening because we're with a master developer that cannot perform their duties to the project because they cannot transact land. Right. And we can't come up with any concrete plans. So, we're doing our...
No, I know, and I'm not, this is not a criticism of it. I guess my point is this. So working with the SRA, the town of Weymouth is going to try to get specific, because it's our obligation as a town to make sure each section of the town has adequate open space. So the open space plan is a changing document. It's good for 7 years. You do it, but we're gonna get to some specificity here, even if it's general specificity, whatever. But we're gonna get somewhere that at least we have something that we can point to.
Yeah.
And we realize that will change,
Right.
but we're not gonna let it just go on the way it is now. It's 1,000 acres of open space, and that's it, with nothing there. So we're gonna get there, and we're gonna work cooperatively to get there. And it's a changing document. Nothing is written in stone forever, but at least it'll give everyone some comfort that the town is looking at least from the Weymouth side, where it's gonna go. That's all. my
Yeah, no, and we welcome that from the
Yeah.
town. Obviously, this is
I
a,
know we're
you know,
all-
this is a special situation because there's a third
Absolutely.
party that's committed to doing some of the building. If this were SRA and Weymouth was saying, you know, we really want to build some new parks here and some new fields here, and the town's gonna fund and maintain that, and that's Mayor Headland's next
Yeah.
big project, we'd be elated. But we're in a situation where sort of this obligation, promises have been made by a third party, so it's
But if we
different.
did get a plan, as Paul and Jim know, then we can get state funds. We're
Right.
eligible
Right,
for the
absolutely,
state funds, so.
and if that's
there
where
is
we're
a, you know,
going.
even if it's a partnership with the master developer or the individual developer, that money can be, you know, maybe it's a 40% match or 50% match, whatever it is. So it's good to have it, it's good to have something in there, because it could open up. I know Paul's looking at, you know, funding with TIP, you know, Mass Works, revolving loan fund, MWRA, so he's looking at all these alternatives. This is just another tool that you guys will have to get some
Yeah.
state funds to leverage.
Yeah, and we absolutely are on the same page and appreciate your help on that. I think it
And
would
I'm
be great.
laser on the open space, because that's what we're doing right now, so I apologize to keep bringing that up.
And I think it's an opportunity to do that, but I also just want to point out that the prior plan submission did not address Union Point at all. So
Right.
this is a new effort, so.
So even including what's already been done would help
Yeah.
in your plan.
Thank you.
Yes.
One last quick question. So the recreation space is not commercial space? I heard
It's
that.
not commercial space.
All right, so is the recreational space part of the foreclosure that's going up for auction, or is that a separate
No,
entity?
so the Carpenter's loan, as we've come to think of it as, was broken into two different parts that were financed by different entities. Washington Capital, who is foreclosing, only financed the portion of the mortgage that was secured by land that was zoned residential. So everything subject to the foreclosure is zoned residential. There's another bank that financed the piece of the loan that's secured by everything that is zoned commercial. We have not received any indication that they're planning to foreclose, but we know that they have not been paid any more than frequently than the residential piece, so that may be coming, but would be a separate action. What's hit the papers now is solely land zoned residential is being put up for auction.
And so the recreation space is just a separate zoning as recreation space or sports space or?
Privately owned.
It's privately owned. It's privately
It's
owned
a
by,
separate
it's
LLC.
privately owned by another LLC
Right.
Okay,
Titles
so they
are-
have no problem?
with
No.
similar members, but a different LLC.
Okay.
I think they have problems, but it's a different problem than the mortgage problem.
It's a wholly owned piece of land.
Any other questions? Great. Seeing none, I'm going to, at this point, anticipate our next meeting will be January 30th, which is an out-of-cycle meeting for us, but given that the foreclosure auction is scheduled before what would be our next scheduled meeting, who knows, there may be developments. I don't have any different information than you have, but I just think that it would be prudent to put January 30th. Unless a high number of board members tell me that Wednesday doesn't work for them.
I can be it.
I can be there.
Yeah.
It's the 5th Wednesday of a month, so that tends to avoid most standing meetings for people.
I'll have to call in on Texas.
Okay. So it looks like we'll have a forum present. Next item on the agenda is we are going to convene an executive session, not to reconvene an open session. The purpose of the executive session is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. In the event that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body. I've reviewed the reasons for tonight's meeting and have determined that we meet the standard. The second is to consider the purchase, exchange, sale, the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. And we've reviewed that reason with council as well and determined that we fall under that exception, allowing us to meet in executive session.
Motion so made.
Second. Roll call vote, Kevin?
Yes.
Tony? Tom,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Kelly? Yes. Yes, Pat,
Yes.
and
Yes.
Chris?